to rise, a victim of your own hand. It is the way of our kind.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, where I cover vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. In this video, we're going to be looking at the vampire species from Hemlock Grove known as the upir. Somehow this series kind of flew under my radar for a long time, but here we are. The show came out in 2013 and has 3 seasons. I watched all 3 seasons in just a few days in preparations for this video, so ripped to my sleep schedule. The show stars Bill Skarsgård as the upir Roman Godfrey, Famke Janssen as his mother, and Landon Liberon as the werewolf Peter Romancic. I will briefly touch on the werewolves, but we will be mostly focusing on the vampires. Also, my second video in a row featuring Bill Skarsgård, because I just covered Nosferatu and he played Count Orlok in that. Let's take a look at Hemlock Grove, the vampire species known as the upir, their history, anatomy, abilities, weaknesses, and more. If you enjoy videos about vampires and other supernatural creatures, leave a like and subscribe for new videos every week. Before we get into the vampires of Hemlock Grove, this video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Most of you are probably familiar with what a VPN does by now, but in case you're not, a VPN helps mask your IP address and encrypt your data so your identity, location, and activity are hidden. This keeps your information safe and can also allow you to appear as if you're in a different country. Switching your location to a different country allows you to gain access to a whole new library of movies and TV, something I do all the time. Netflix is known for having amazing movies, but sometimes certain movies are only available in certain countries. For example, if you want to watch Django Unchained, Inglourious Basterds, Van Helsing, or Shawshank Redemption, well, just switch your location to Canada. You can do this to find so many different movies and TV shows on sites you already have a subscription to. Changing your location can also allow you to find better deals on hotels, flights, and car rentals. With Surfshark, no customer logs are kept, 24/7 customer support, and my favorite part, unlimited devices. That means you can use one Surfshark account across all your devices, desktops, laptops, tablets, mobile devices, and more for one price. Surfshark also has an antivirus with a lot of great features, including real-time protection and webcam protection. Secure your privacy and try Surfshark now. Use my link in the description below to get a huge discount and 4 extra months free. There's zero reason not to try because they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. Go to surfshark.com/Lawlins or click the link in the description below. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring the video.
Happy birthday, darling.
We can start with the history and origins of the upir. This will be a pretty short section of the video because we know pretty much nothing about their origins or how they were created in the show. The term upir comes from Slavic folklore, and the legends go back as far as roughly 1000 AD, so the species is at least 1000 years old, but most likely a lot older. The upir could be as old or older than the human species itself. In traditional folklore, a upir was a person who was either cursed before death, died suddenly, or in a gruesome manner. Someone who wasn't baptized, had their burial desecrated, people who took their own life, witches, and more. To sum it up, pretty much anything that made a spirit unclean could lead to someone becoming a upir. Many stories of the upir and similar creatures were said to come back from the grave to kill their own family. This reminds me of how the vampires from Salem's Lot would often go after their closest family members first. In different places, the upir is called a slightly different name, but the legend remains basically the same. Although, other than the name, upir from Hemlock Grove share almost no similarities with their traditional counterpart. The vampires, or upir from Hemlock Grove, are quite unique as far as vampires go. First off, the only way to become a upir is to be born one. There is no way to be turned. Although there may be many supernatural aspects to the upir, their condition is also biological, as shown when Roman underwent a medical procedure to become human, and it would have worked if he didn't skip his last treatment. The procedure was basically replacing all of Roman's upir DNA with human DNA. A very smart doctor named Johann was able to identify exactly what makes a upir the way they are, and it's a heritable retroviral anomaly. Now, I'm no Roanoke Gaming, so I'm not an expert in real science, but from my research, a retroviral anomaly is a piece of virus DNA that has been added into a person's genetic code. The heritable part means that it was inherited, so that most likely means that every upir could be traced back to one progenitor. How this first upir was created, we'll never know. But since this species is at least 1000 years old, they wouldn't have had the science to achieve this medically. That means their origin is most likely supernatural. My guess would be like the upir legends, someone was cursed before death, returning as a upir, and then spread it to their children and so on. Unlike the traditional legends and most vampires, the upir in Hemlock Grove are not undead, they are living beings with a beating heart. When a upir like Roman is born, they are actually not full upir yet and do not have access to all of their abilities. When Roman was in this pre-upir state, he only had a very mild thirst for blood and didn't know why. The only ability he had was being able to mesmerize people by making eye contact. If he looks at someone, he can make them do anything he wants. Kiss someone, forget something, put a gun in your mouth. Every time he uses this ability, it causes him to have a nosebleed like Eleven from Stranger Things. It doesn't seem to cause any permanent damage though. Peter asks him if it's painful to do this, and Roman says it is. I'm not going to be talking much about the story from Hemlock Grove as I'm focusing on the vampire species, but just for context, Roman is a upir who becomes best friends with a werewolf, which is Peter. The species have been known enemies for a long time, but for some reason the two were drawn to each other. Anyway, so in this partial upir form, Roman does not have to consume blood and can mesmerize people. In order for someone to become a full upir, they must take their own life. The person, in this case Roman, will die and then return to life shortly after as a full upir. Once being awakened as a full upir, Roman still had the ability to mesmerize people, but also gained superhuman strength, enhanced senses, upir venom, healing, greater durability, and immortality. Of course, this all comes at the cost of his newly acquired thirst and need for blood. Something I found interesting was Roman was able to use his mesmerize ability on himself by looking in the mirror. He did it to try and take away his own fear. Their healing ability is quite good, being able to recover from almost anything besides getting their head removed. Physical trauma and even gunshots have little to no effect. When it comes to immortality, the upir seems to age normally until they make the transition to full upir. Roman was around 18 when he turned, so he should remain that way forever. There seems to be an exception to this though, because Olivia took her life and became a full upir at the age of 13. But today she appears to be middle-aged and has remained that way for a very long time. This means that if a upir completes their transformation as a child, they still age to an adult and then stop. You never have to worry about being stuck as a child like something from Interview with the Vampire. Many upirs are frozen at a different age because they all make their full transformation at different times. It's possible that if you complete the transformation when you're young, that your body will age to your physical prime, like some other vampire viruses. The exact age of Roman's mother, Olivia, is a bit of a mystery because we don't know the exact year she was born. We have seen a flashback as far back as 1884 in Paris, and she still looked the exact same, confirming she has not aged a day in over 100 years. My guess for Olivia's age based on the time period when she was a child would be around 150 years old or slightly older. As for appearances of the upir, Roman looks the same after the transformation as he did before. It does show him for a brief moment having fangs like a traditional vampire. His mother, who is upir, also showed having fangs when she was younger. However, after the first season, we never see a upir display fangs again, so I think they might have changed their minds on upir having fangs. Instead of fangs, the upir have a very unique way of feeding. Normally, they would just bite the person's neck using their ordinary teeth, or cut them. But sometimes, when a upir is angry or extremely bloodthirsty, their jaw can stretch open unnaturally wide, allowing them to engulf a person's entire neck with one bite. They're kind of like a snake, or the ice cream man from Legion. This is a really unique way for a vampire to feed, and I don't think I've ever seen it before. Upir must feed on blood quite often to sustain themselves or they will start to suffer side effects. These include blurred vision, confusion, becoming weaker, and trouble controlling their behavior. They can feed from humans of course, but Roman is also seen feeding from a horse, so they can consume animal blood. Upir can and will also consume flesh. When Roman is hungry but can't get blood, we see him eating raw meat. We see that rare blood types are like a fine wine to the upir, so there must be some taste difference between blood types. While at a get-together, they sample the rarest blood type in the world, known as the golden blood type, or Rh null. It's said that less than 50 people in the entire world have this blood type. I never knew that. Some upir hunt for their food by killing humans, but most find a more sustainable way to feed. Some upir like Annie do not like killing and prefer to feed in a more humane way. After Roman's father died, he became the owner of Godfrey Industries in the building known as the White Tower. In here, all kinds of medical experiments take place, and Dr. Johann was able to create a substance that upirs can feed from. It is created from his failed experiments, blended up into a liquid. Pleasant. Upir can feed from pretty much any blood, fresh or not, human, animal, in a bag, in a pudding, but they cannot feed from other upir. Roman is told by his upir sister that feeding from other upir will make them sick. Although Roman did feed from his mother in the first season, but I think that was another bit of oversight, like the fangs. When a upir is newly turned, they need to give their body time to adjust to feeding on blood. Dr. Johann warns Roman not to overindulge because he's not ready, but he proceeds to gorge himself on blood, only to throw it up shortly after. Roman is seen eating regular food many times, so upir can still consume normal food, but they prefer their food uncooked or very rare. I want to talk about the upir's superhuman strength for a moment. They're one of the strongest supernaturals in the series, on par or stronger than a Vargulf or a reanimated human. A Vargulf is basically a rabid werewolf, and a reanimated human is obviously a human that's been reanimated, and for some reason they are gifted with superhuman strength. Werewolves seem to have no extra strength while in human form, whereas Roman can send someone flying a dozen or more feet or break someone's neck like a twig. Dr. Johann suffers from something called hysterical strength. Due to a problem with his adrenal glands, he has almost superhuman strength. When Roman was only part upir, Johann was able to overpower him easily. After Roman was turned into full upir, he picked up Johann by the neck like he weighed nothing and threw him aside effortlessly. Roman also overpowered a werewolf, grabbed it by the mouth King Kong style and ripped it in half with his bare hands. A human is absolutely no match for a upir. Roman's mother Olivia was able to single-handedly defeat a skilled hunter trained in killing supernaturals. Well, she didn't just kill her, she broke her neck and then skinned her alive, all without receiving a single scratch.
Steel. You must make your heart steel.
Clever boy.
Upir biology. Other than their altered DNA, supernatural abilities, and thirst for blood, they are pretty similar to humans. They can consume regular food if they want to, but they still have to drink blood. One odd thing that Dr. Johann notes is that the upir does not react to anesthesia, so when Roman underwent a procedure, he had to be awake the whole time. Upir still have to use the bathroom and can mate with humans and have babies. When it comes to upir having babies, it gets a little confusing. When Roman had his daughter Nadia, he was only half upir at the time. It's not clear whether or not she will be able to make the transition into a full upir. Odds are though, she can become a full upir because of what I'm about to talk about. Another phenomenon when it comes to babies born from a upir is the caul. This is a flesh-like membrane made of the amniotic sac that covers the baby's face when they are born. In many cultures, this is said to be good luck, but in some, they believe when someone is born with a caul and dies, they become a vampire. Olivia, Roman, his sister Annie, and Nadia were all born with the caul. This made me wonder if only babies born with a caul can become upir, especially considering Olivia killed multiple babies of her own until she got one with a caul. Dr. Johann states that upir have less human emotions, which explains how she could do something so horrific. Anyway, what leads me to believe only babies born with the caul can become upir is something Annie says to Roman. After meeting him, she says, "I thought you were like me, born with the caul." This insinuates that only babies born with a caul are upir. This would make sense because Roman's sister Shelly was born without a caul and never shows any signs of being upir. This also means that not all children born from a upir become upir, only those with the caul. At one point in the series, we are introduced to a group called the Order of the Dragon. Eventually, some of the members become much more radical and start to kill babies born with a caul to prevent these supernaturals from ever causing any harm. This shows how important the caul is and that it's most likely a tell for someone becoming a upir, and possibly a werewolf too. Some upir are born with a physical deformity. Olivia, for example, was born with a small tail. She cuts it off herself and this leads to her bleeding out and transforming into a full upir. It's possible many upir are born with some kind of deformity, but that's never shown. Upir are either immortal or can live for thousands of years, but there is one thing that can take away their immortality, and that's upir venom, also called upir toxin. Upir have an extra sinus on the roof of their mouth like a snake's venom sac. The strange thing is that the toxin has little to no effect on humans, but has a terrible effect for other upir. When Roman bit his own mother, the venom caused her to start aging like a human. She was also very frail, needing a cane to walk. Normally, a upir is immune to almost all human diseases and ailments, except congenital heart failure. Apparently that's still bad for upirs. But after being affected by upir venom, Olivia developed cancer. Despite temporarily losing her immortality, she was still much stronger than a human, and after feeding from Dr. Johann's genetically perfect creation, Olivia's cancer was cured. So by ingesting new DNA, it fixed her own, curing her cancer and returning her immortality.
There are specific changes taking place in your bloodstream I'd not noticed before.
We have talked about the upir's biology, abilities, and feeding. So now let's talk about their weaknesses. These vampires are not weak to crosses, holy water, or anything religious. They are also not weak to garlic, and silver is reserved for werewolves only. So what are they weak to? Well, according to the Order of the Dragon that's been hunting upir for at least 5 centuries, the only way to kill them is fire or decapitation. Even a stake to the heart will only put them down for a few hours thanks to their healing abilities, and apparently even then you want to coat the blade or stake in an anticoagulant. This probably slows their healing down. Most notably, these vampires are not weak to sunlight, and it does not weaken them at all. There is one more weakness that is specific to upirs, but I will talk about that soon because it ties in with something else. First, I want to talk about Roman's sister and his daughter. We will start with his sister Shelly. For some unknown reason, his sister passed away as an infant but was reanimated by Dr. Johann. It was an experimental procedure, and it was a success, but she suffered some unforeseen side effects. For one, she's over 7 feet tall in the first season, and one of her eyes and part of her head are badly disfigured. Her hands are always wrapped in bandages because underneath they look like they're rotting away. Although this doesn't seem to cause her any pain, as she once snapped off one of her fingers to give to someone. This reanimation procedure also granted Shelly superhuman strength. She might be one of the strongest supernaturals in the series. She was able to effortlessly kill a werewolf by breaking its neck. Since she is Roman's sister, she could be half upir, although she is never seen using the mesmerize ability that Roman had, and it's never said in the show whether she was born with a caul or not. Even though she displays no upir abilities or fondness for blood, it's still possible she could become a full upir if she took her own life. It's also possible that the reanimation process might have affected her upir genes, and it's not possible. The last side effect of the reanimation is that Shelly's skin will glow sometimes when it's touched. This is because Dr. Johann used phosphorus in some part of the reanimation process, thus making her glow. Like I said before, it's never said how Shelly died as an infant, but there is the possibility that Olivia killed her. That's never explicitly said, but Olivia killed several other children because they didn't have the caul, so who's to say she wouldn't have done it to Shelly? Now I want to talk about Roman's daughter Nadia. She exhibits some unique traits even among upirs. She has piercing blue eyes and the ability to kill someone just by looking at them. That cult I mentioned earlier that was killing children born with the caul were after Nadia. The leader breaks into the room where the baby is, and when Nadia stares at him, he starts to scream and bleed from his eyes until he's dead. Nadia also had the ability of affecting people's dreams in the house, making Peter and Roman dream the same thing. She also used some kind of mind control or compulsion on a woman that was staying with Roman to make the woman breastfeed her. So she has multiple mental-like abilities. This either means that different upir can have different abilities, or Roman's daughter is special. And I think it's more likely that the abilities of Roman's daughter are unique, because we don't see them displayed by any other upirs in the series. Roman's daughter is shown being extremely smart for an infant. She spelled out her own name using blocks, affected Roman, Peter, and Miranda's dreams, and knew who to kill even as a baby. I'd be afraid to babysit her myself because I wouldn't want this happening to me by mistake. In Hemlock Grove, there is no established upir society or vampire government like in a lot of other series and movies. Some of them will still gather together, but all upir are left to their own devices to do as they wish. Some do gather in small groups like I said, like Annie's friends, and they prepare blood-based meals. Annie informs Roman that there's upirs all over the place, and they usually work in jobs that keep them close to blood. She is a nurse. She also tells Roman that the coroner in their town was a upir, and that almost every coroner in the country is upir. This makes it sound like the upir population is quite high, but Dr. Johann says that it's actually quite low. The upir and werewolves are not at war, but they seem to have a disdain for each other. Even though Peter was warned to stay away from Roman and vice versa, the two were still inevitably drawn together. They even shared visions and dreams of events to come, and there's a good reason for that. We end up learning that Olivia's first daughter Magdalena, now known as Annie, is the grandmother or great-grandmother to Peter's grandfather Nikolai, meaning Roman and Peter are actually related. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the upir boogeyman, a species called Jormungandr, also known as Amal negru. I'm going to be referring to it as the Amal negru so I don't keep butchering the word Jormungandr. This is a race of creatures that has existed longer than the upir. Unlike the upir that came from Slavic folklore, the Amal negru is from Norse mythology. Actually, the creature itself and the name Jormungandr is Norse, but Amal negru is actually the name of a Romanian being or creature that is basically the boogeyman. So this creature is kind of a mix between Romanian and Norse mythology. In the Norse legend, the Omal Negru is sometimes called the World Serpent. The story goes that once this serpent-like creature reaches its full size, it will encircle the entire earth and swallow its own tail. When it eventually spits its tail out, that signals the beginning of Ragnarok, the apocalypse. The serpent swallowing its own tail is often called an Ouroboros, which is a reoccurring image throughout Hemlock Grove. Their race once thrived, but today, Dr. Arnold Spivak is the only remaining Omal Negru. That's why his main goal is to create offspring. They are immortal, shape-shifting creatures whose true form is a massive reptile-like creature with wings and a humanoid face. They are also apparently sulfur-based creatures. They have the ability to take the form of a human, and Dr. Arnold Spivak spends most of his time like that. They have healing, super strength, extra durability, flight in his true form, and acid spit like the blood from the Alien movies. So, if they're this incredibly strong, how did their race die out? The answer is the upir. The two races were competing for food, aka humans. Although the Omal Negru are extremely resilient, almost unkillable, they have one fatal weakness: upir venom. Like I said before, they are a sulfur-based creature, and the upir venom has a high concentration of nitrogen oxide, causing them to burst into flames. When Dr. Spivak is killed in an extremely unclimactic fight, he turns into a small Ouroboros, and then gets stomped on. Now, another important reason to bring up Dr. Spivak in this video about upir is that he tried to eradicate them. He did this by engineering a special cancer that only affects upir and is completely harmless to humans. Once a upir is infected with this parasite/cancer, they will develop dark veins and sores in certain parts of their skin. Inside their body is much worse. A parasitic cancer grows, wrapping itself around the spinal cord and into the brain, particularly around the eyes. This makes it pretty much completely impossible to remove this parasitic cancer. It also prevents the upir from being able to feed. When an infected upir tries to drink blood, they will vomit it back out. The cancer will slowly drive them insane and make them look like a zombie, and eventually take over the upir completely like the fungi from The Last of Us. It will drive the upir to attack other upirs, basically turning them into zombies. Dr. Spivak also somehow programmed into this parasite that after a certain amount of time and all the upirs were killed, if any were left remaining and didn't die from the parasite, they would consume themselves. We see this happen to a rat and at least one upir. They will literally rip themselves to shreds. I think the upir is a really unique take on the vampire mythos, and I enjoyed it. Not too often I see a depiction of vampires that feels fresh and new, and this did that pretty well. The only thing I wish we got was the origin story of how the species was created, how the first upir was turned. That's my video about the upir from Hemlock Grove. I think this series is pretty good. Just don't ask me about Season 3. Let me know if you'd like a video covering the werewolves, witches, and Omal Negru from Hemlock Grove in greater detail, because there's still a lot of interesting stuff to cover there, especially with the werewolves. Like I said before, I always enjoy seeing a new and unique take on a vampire, and I think Hemlock Grove does a good job on that. They almost don't feel like a vampire but their own species, which I guess technically they are, but you know what I mean. If there's any other movies, TV shows, or video games you want me to cover, leave them in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. It helps the channel, and I'm so close to 250,000 subscribers, and that would be such an awesome milestone to hit. As always, an extra shout out to all my members for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.